We are trying to get you to go towards those things that you usually try and run away from. And the more you do that, the easier it will become to learn to let that stuff take care of itself, because you will have taught yourself to care a whole lot less about it. And as you get to the point where you really don't care, guess what happens? Over time, you just don't notice it anymore. And therefore, it sort of ceases to exist. So when we are talking about and thinking about exposure and response prevention, the first and probably the most important thing is for us to be clear about what is the intention, what's the goal, why are you doing these exposures? And this is something that actually can trip people up from the start, which is we've got to be clear that we want you to do these exposures so that you can learn to care less about any thoughts, images, sensations, said that already, that you get, and allow those things to just come and go freely. But the intention is not to stop them or get rid of them, okay? And as soon as your intention becomes, I'm doing this to get rid of it, it flips over into being unhelpful rather than being helpful, okay? So that's the first thing that we need to bear in mind. What is the goal when we're doing anything regarding treating our OCD? Is the goal needs to be about learning to deal with it differently and let it take care of itself. Okay, so as I said previously, a lot of people find the idea of ERP either really scary or just impossible to do. They're like, well, it doesn't work for my kind of OCD. And what I would say about that is that I can't think of a situation in which someone can't use exposure response prevention, as long as you understand what it is you're exposing yourself to. You're exposing yourself to your fear. Okay, what is it that you fear? You're fearing these thoughts, images, urges, sensations, these things that come in that you don't want to be there. That's what you're fearing, right? Those are the things you're trying to get away from. So often I'll have people say things like, oh yeah, but my worries are about stabbing someone. I can't just go out and stab someone to expose myself to it. And I'm like, no, the thing is, it's the thinking of it that is your problem. You're worried about thinking about it. And so what we're getting you to expose yourself to is either the thought, idea, image, sensation, or anything that you think will trigger you having that thought or idea, image, sensation. Okay, so that means that you can do ERP with anything. You know, if your worries are about, can I really see, for example? Yeah, how do people get confused? How do I expose myself to that? Well, what we're exposing you to is your thoughts or worries about it. So you can do it with anything at all. Okay, so that is the first thing. Well, actually, that's the second thing, isn't it? The first thing is to be clear what the intention is. And the second thing is to understand what it is you're exposing yourself to. Okay? So how do you do this depends a little bit on how your OCD manifests for you. So if you are clear that certain things are way scarier than others for you, what I would suggest is making a hierarchy. And I made a video about that, which is when you put everything in a kind of vague order of like scariness, and you sort of start lower down and work up. Okay. Now, sometimes for some people, everything feels equally scary. And I find this is more with people who have the kind of OCD that usually gets referred to as pure O, that any kind of thoughts could be equally scary. And that's fine. If that's the case, just bung them all down on a piece of paper and work through them in whatever way you want. So I'm going to give you some ideas of how to expose yourself to some of these thoughts, ideas, images, sensations without kind of having to go off and do anything major. This is stuff that you can do every day easily, okay? And that's quite handy because, when we're trying to do something we don't want to do, we'll usually find an excuse. So the more simple you can make it, the more accessible you can make it, the more likely it is you're going to do it. So I'm going to give you a bunch of relatively simple but very effective ideas of how to expose yourself to the things that you're usually avoiding, namely your thoughts, urges, images, sensations. Okay, and through me doing this is so not an exhaustive list. These are just a few ideas that hopefully you really help you kind of get the point, okay? Because ultimately you can be super creative with how you expose yourself to this stuff. And I just want to say at this point, like, I understand that when I'm talking about this, I could easily come across as sounding a little bit flippant. Like, I want you to know that I understand that for somebody who's in the throes of suffering from OCD, this stuff is super difficult, painful, feels almost impossible, okay? When I'm talking about these thoughts, urges, and sensations, just like that, throwaway, the reason that I do that is not because I'm in any way trying to belittle your experience of it. It's about me modeling for you that that's all they are, okay? I know they feel massive and important and big for you, but that is what they are, and that's what we want to get you to a point of being able to kind of have that sort of like, oh yeah, that's it attitude. And that's sort of why I do that, why I don't kind of whisper these things or, you know, say it in a very grave voice, because I'm trying to help you to sort of understand that actually changing your attitude and the way you view that is all part of this, okay? So I just wanted to say that. It's not that I'm thinking it's super easy, because trust me, I really know that it's not. Okay, so here are a bunch of ideas, all right? So first one that I find is super easy for most people these days to put in practice. It's to make a recording of feared thoughts, okay? So, you know, use your smartphone or whatever. I would suggest, first of all, writing them down in a list, because it's a lot easier if you've written it first. And then read it, record it out loud, obviously, and then play it back to yourself on loop. Okay, so what is the idea behind this? What is the intention? Okay, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the video. The intention is to take away the sting, to get your brain to habituate to these thoughts, that they don't go, oh, I've thought that, so that they go, oh, that thought again, so boring. Okay, so that's what our intention is. It is not to get rid of them, it's not to stop them, it's to make them less bothersome for you, to take away the sting, to take away the meaning. Okay, so what I would recommend is when you do this and you do the recording, we want you to listen to it on loop, because it depends for you. Everyone's going to have a different amount of thoughts. Some people, it will just be the same thought over and over again. You know, I'm going to kill my daughter, I'm going to kill my daughter, I'm going to kill my daughter. It could be that same thought over and over, or it could be all sorts of different thoughts that you're going to put together on one recording. It doesn't really matter. Make them statements, okay? Don't make them what ifs, make them statements. As in, so rather than, what if I kill my daughter? It's, I'm going to kill my daughter, or I've killed my daughter, right? Make it a statement and a fact, not a worry. Much more effective that way. Okay, so you're going to write it out, then record it. Now, once you've done that, this is the way that you want to work with it. You're thinking about, like when you do any exposure, the idea is that you're exposing yourself to the thing, and then you stay in that situation. And in this example, the situation is the listening to or hearing of those thoughts. So you stay with the recording until your anxiety level has started to come down, until you've started to habituate. If you're not clear about what I'm talking about when I say habituation, then go back to some of the earlier videos where I talk about habituation, because it's important that you understand what that means, okay? So now, when you're listening to when you're playing that recording, okay, here's the idea. You don't have to listen to it all the time. Think of it like putting on the radio, right? Or putting on some music. You put it on because you want to hear it, but you don't intensely listen to every single word, right? So you think of it like putting on the radio. You can play this and have it while you put around and do the washing up or whatever, right? And if your attention is going in and out of listening to it, that is okay, all right? This is not one where you have to pay attention at all times, okay? So if you're paying attention, that's fine. You don't have to not pay attention to it. And if you're not paying attention to it, that's also fine. What you'll usually find is at the beginning, when you start playing it, it's going to be like, oh, that feels a bit scary. And therefore you're going to pay it a lot of attention. But the more you hear the same thing over and over, guess what happens? Oh, your brain goes, oh, so boring. Okay. And you'll start to notice that your attention is going to drift elsewhere. That is fine. You do not have to take it back to the recording. Okay. If it goes back, that's also fine. Okay. So do that for approximately 5 minutes, once or twice a day. Okay. If it's super scary for you, you may find that you need to do it for longer. What we don't want is you starting it and then feeling like your anxiety is like 10 out of 10 and then turning it off. Okay, that's what we really don't want, because then you're not teaching yourself that if you keep listening to it, that you will habituate. Okay, so that's the first idea, and honestly, that can be super effective to do that. All right, you're exposing yourself to things that you usually try and get away from. All right, so it's a really great way of saying to you, you are demonstrating, I don't care about you, OCD. Look, I'm even deliberately listening to this stuff. So whatever, okay, that's what we're doing with this. All right, a few other ideas, particularly if there are certain sort of images or things that you know trigger you, you can put images as a screensaver on your computer or your phone. Maybe on the screensaver you can have a rolling thing, so lots of different stuff comes up. So again, what we're doing here, what's our intention? We're seeing more of it. We're triggering ourselves to have thoughts, urges, sensation, images that we don't like more often, not less often, so that we can learn to care less about them. Okay, so that's a relatively simple thing. You can use this in conjunction with other things. Okay, these don't all have to be done separately, like 1 week at a time or anything. Now here's one that is really great, but a lot of people hate. Right, a little bit like when I asked you to do the recording. Write down a bunch of your sort of fears. Maybe get yourself some little index cards or something like that. Okay, and put one fear on each card. Okay, depending how many fears you have, in fact, definitely double them up. So write at least the same fear on at least 2 cards. Okay, and so you're basically creating yourself a little pack of cards. Now, what do we usually do with cards? We play with them. Okay, so again, going back to the idea that I'm not being flippant about this. I know it can be really hard, but we're trying to help you to treat this stuff differently, right? This is a super duper shame attacking exercise as well. If you have someone you can play with, okay, you can do it on your own, but even better if you can play with an understanding friend or relative or whatever, family member, someone who knows about your OCD, who you trust to kind of not reassure you and not get involved. So then use these as playing cards. Play Snap. Play, Bad Thought Snap. Play the memory game. Can't think of any more card games. Bingo is a beautiful one. You can play Thought Bingo. Then you have to create yourself a little board. But again, what we're doing is getting you more exposed to these thoughts. Playing a game with a friend where you're going, Snap, I'm a sex offender. It's about taking that sting out of a thought that otherwise comes and goes, oh my God, I've got to do something about this. Okay. More ideas. Write your thoughts on some sticky notes. Put them around the house. Every morning when you go into the bathroom, you see, I'm the devil incarnate stuck on your bathroom window. I'm an evil person, or whatever it is that you are worrying about. Okay, so you also, similar with that, the sticky note one, you could do printing out images as well. Stick out, images of the devil, or um, something else that that you don't want to, you would usually avoid. Okay, so those are just a few little ideas. Okay, and what I wanted to do by telling you those things is give you a sense of what we are trying to achieve here. We are trying to get you to go towards those things that you usually try and run away from. And the more you do that, the easier it will become to learn to let that stuff take care of itself, because you will have taught yourself to care a whole lot less about it. And as you get to a point where you really don't care, guess what happens? Over time, you just don't notice it anymore. And therefore, it sort of ceases to exist.